and professional worlds today is like working on hot coals because of the risk of misunderstanding, and so, in order to better explain the point of view of the board that I'm honored to represent, it's necessary to dispel for some misunderstandings. We all feel the need of bringing order to the professional world, and it's also possible that while I'm talking to you, a new professional competence is rising. I would underline a professional competence different from a profession whose borders are defined in Article 33 of the Italian Constitution. But now, first of all, we should determine the starting point. We have seen that recently newspapers have written many pages about professional goals, about the importance of existing or not, comparing the professional goals under the juridical aspect to associations, but we all know that also association of magicians and fortune tellers exist, but we also know that they have nothing to do with the word profession. Newspapers have also spoken about different professions, A, B, C, according to their training origin, and they have also spoken about the liberalization of professions, but unfortunately nobody has spoken about the real sense of the profession, and it's from the explanation of this concept that we can well understand the point of view. I have some ideas about this important subject, and first of all, I love defining the tecnologi alimentari as a professional making an activity but based on an intense, instinctive and continuous scientific knowledge of production process, and with adds creative activity governed by the deontological code of our world. So, we can easily imagine the food technologists generating innovative ideas, starting from creativity but with scientific rules, whose aim is the improvement of life standards through food productions. Therefore, the professionist sells a service, but it's probably correct to talk about performances of service, marked by a high level of professionalism, thus the high level. Professionalism food technologists has a strong bond to scientific knowledge, science and technologies, with the theoretical practical body paying careful attention to research progress. Firstly, of knowledge through continuous updating of training, the capability of meeting new needs of the society, the respect of code ethic, failure could lead the exclusion from the professional world. Hence, food technologists could be considered as workers of knowledge not based on a deterministic culture, rather on a probabilistic culture. This is an important difference to explain the capability of the technologist to follow the evolution of the events, and this capacity of conforming to any situation in this world that continues change. I realize I let myself go to common remarks to me and to my fellow counselors that are trying to create a starting point to reformulate the figure of the future food technologist. This is our reformation. As a matter of fact, it's true that the Italian food is certainly a lighthouse and landmark in the world scenery, and it is true that this light is on thanks to the effort of innovation and research, we don't understand the reason why a cold, cultureless politics was to homogenize so specific competencies in one big pot, risking to create much confusion and to alienate a field of excellence of our country. Our field, field of food technologies, is trying to make a big self-criticism efforts in order to trace a part of entire, starting from what a technology has been, is, and will be related to the social reality surrounding him. His first step was to degree in food preparations, when the main need was to prepare, store, and produce food to feed people. Then he became a food technologist because new needs arose: the improvement of processing and the methods of food preservation. And then he became a specialist because he had to meet the need of proposing to the customer high-serving content products. And now my thought goes to example to Gordon Bloom, a creator of our colleague Renato Vettura. But there are outstanding issues such as in this moment characterized by the deregulation that is becoming a real must. There will still be in Italy the big food industry, which could be the future scenario. In the big industries, if the big industry invests in research, the innovation will still be of small and medium enterprise. Will be small and medium enterprises still able to continue to drive force to creativity typical of Italian culture? In Europe, we have imported a workforce, but new population with their culture and their religion needs have arrived. Now, I wonder, will we be ready to accept, to accommodate, to learn from them rather than imposing our point of view in food? To put it in a nutshell, we should master a cultural mutation translated into the changing of our target, which isn't the product anymore, but that is called a man. A man in the center of a spiral, when elements such as religion, habits, culture, environment, climate, sustainability, biocapacity, intolerance, etc. swing. Some time ago, I explained what the food technology professional world was and what the food technologists were. Today, I suppose to present, not necessary to defend, the view of industry on the positive and negative aspects of concept-oriented food technology, namely food technologists who have a rather theoretical approach of their work as compared with the application-oriented food technology, with a more practical approach. I said, I'm supposed, because I soon realized my first contact with industry and the consumer association that though they acknowledge the fact that there is such a dichotomy, they are in fact making use of both types of food technologies to a different extent depending on their field and activity. And they cannot compare them as their work is different. Moreover, there is no clear-cut divide between them. A food technologist is someone whose activity consists in solving concrete and often complex technological problems, which arise when conceiving, implementing, or producing products, systems, or services, a skill that results from a set of scientific, technical, economic, social, and human knowledge. If we consider the various types of food technologies, it's possible to place approximately some technologist functions on a scale from very theoretical to very practical and schematized on following feature. It's, however, impossible to assign to each of those types of food technologies a precise enough quotation on a graduated scale. But even if we could find a way to do it, which for me it's impossible, it would be useful because the technology profession is in continuous evolution, and we are here to reflect together to the formation of tomorrow's profession, which will be different from today's technologies, and this one are different from yesterday's food technologies.
My intervention will address the relationship between freedom as supplying services in the European Union and national legislation on profession, food technologies, competencies and public function. In order to set the food technologies in the European legal framework, it is necessary to spend a few words on legal technique in the field of international law. First of all, the notion of community method inaugurated by the French minister Robert Schuman on the May 9th, 1950, which led 6 countries, Italy, France, Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg and Netherlands, to sign the treaty establishing the European Community on the March 25th, 1957. This international agreement was methodologically innovated in the field of the cooperation between states, in that it introduced the principle of majority as prevailing when adopting deliberation, and the power of adopting also legally binding in a mandatory acts for the states participating in the treaty. Nevertheless, the European Community cannot be defined as a federal state, in that it is not a legal entity with general purposes, unlike each individual state which keeps its sovereignty inside its own territory. In other words, Europe can make laws only in specific fields indicated by the treaties, and the scope of this intervention is established by the Article 2 of the treaty. The founding idea of the European Community based on the objective of the creation of a common market includes words, both intellectual and manual, in the legal category of freedoms, and indicates the 4 fundamental freedoms: free movement of goods, persons, capital, services, and the main tool to reach the common market. The work of the food technologies is obviously not an exception to this principle. Nevertheless, it is necessary to analyze the aspect of the tertiary level skilled education, that is professionalism, contained in the European regulations with regard to the professions. Free movement of services, to which the activity of food technology professional is referable, apart from the different practices and regulations of the profession adopted by each single member state, is implemented through Directive on Services, also known as the Bolkestein Directive. This directive is intended to facilitate freedom of establishment and provide services inside the community, since services account for 70% of European employment, and liberalization, according to European legislation, can increase employment and European gross domestic product. With industrial development in the food field, controls on the production chain became necessary, as well as the introduction of highly skilled professionals. In fact, compared to the more general role played by the technical chemical director in the past, food technologist has broad education connected with the food industry. This is due to the different technical solutions adopted in the various national production systems, also in connection with quality standards and especially food safety, in addition to the difference due to the preparation of recognized, hence protected, typical products by European regulations. I'm thinking of the various types of protected denomination of origin. The position of food technologists is different in various member states of the European Union, also in connection with the professional's legal position recognized by the states themselves. In some legal systems, his or her activity is characterized by public authority. In Italy, for example, he or she has certification powers, with the result that he or she can produce public deeds and act as a public official, mostly in view of food safety in order to secure consumer protection. In the light of the development of this profession in food science, processing, preservation and distribution, one can legitimately wonder whether greater and more homogeneous regulation of this sector is necessary. During the last 50 years, the evolution of the society triggered new requests in addition to the objective needs stemming from technical and scientific findings. Mass production in globalized modern society may cause, as shown by world news, an exponentially increasing damage to community, not only owing to the substantial size of the food industry, but also to distribution of products in areas which are very distant from the place of production. A good example is food preservation procedures on the complex question linked to the distribution of food coming from parts of the world lacking in health controls. The European Community feels the same need, having asked the European Commission to jot down the preliminary charter to update the directive on services concerning professional qualification. The Commission underscores that the European law concerning the free circulation of persons and services is already in place. Such principle is crucial to European competitiveness, even though it hasn't been used to its full extent yet. Actually, the European Centre for Professional Training forecasts the need of 60 million highly qualified workers by 2020. The European Commission believes that it is useful to establish a common standard of training which might become an official document named the European Professional Charter. Such action might as well be the solution to workers who choose the work in country which isn't the country where they obtained their educational qualification. The above-mentioned tentative standard should include a national certified qualification or an on-hand professional experience of at least 2 years' time. In conclusion, when it comes to job qualification that involve risk to public health, as in the food area, I feel there must be a mandatory certification issue. by a government institution or a professional organization with specific competences.
I am here to talk about professionalism, food professionals, regulation of food professionals. It's a difficult topic to unpick. My background is, as Ruiz mentioned, I'm a specialist in food legislation, in food regulation, food control systems. And there can be a bit of an overlap, or there is an overlap, between the regulation as in national food control systems and what we're talking about here today, which is the regulation of a food profession. And it is a difficult concept to try and get to identify exactly what we're trying to do, and I think that's one of the problems that the organisers have, that the topic is diverse and the words we use aren't necessarily clear. So I'm going to try and help give you my perspective on the topic. It's very much a personal view. I don't represent any particular organisation, but of course I do come from the University of Reading, where we have a Department of Food and Nutritional Sciences. So let me just try and help, well, let me give you my perspective anyway, and see if that can contribute to the discussions. The first point is, well, what are we actually talking about? What is a food professional? And I think our first two speakers have helped us identify that situation. We've already heard about the need for experience within the profession, and I went to the IFST, the Institute of Food Science and Technologists website in the United Kingdom. That's the professional body for food scientists, food technologists in the UK. And I found this on their website, the definition of a food professional. And it matches very similar, sort of the concepts that are contained within it are very similar to what we've just been hearing about here in Italy. Experience-based knowledge, wisdom in applying that knowledge. And ultimately, as it says at the end there, overriding responsibility is to the consumer. A code of ethics, in a sense, saying ultimately, whatever your company wants you to do, your responsibility as a professional is to protect the consumer. So there are similarities, and great similarities, I think, there between the Italian situation and the UK. But as far as the national legislation is concerned, this is not legally defined. This is a group of professionals getting together to try and enhance the status of the profession, rather than providing a legal framework. So, the university education, and this is the Department of Food and Nutritional Sciences at Reading. What we try to do is prepare students for a career in the food industry. Some go off and do other things, but the vast majority of our students do gain employment and go on and have a long career in the food industry. We are the largest food science and technology department in the United Kingdom, with about 28 academic staff. It goes up and down a bit, but that's, I think the last count I had was 28. Our intake of students is about 120, 130 across a number of different undergraduate degree programs, and we have 3 master's programs covering food science, food technology, and nutritional, food science and nutrition. And it would be wonderful if I could promise those students when they graduate a recognition that they have a legally defined job to go into, and that they will have a great status having graduated from our university with a degree from our department. But they don't. They have to demonstrate, they have to take their knowledge that they have got with us, and they have to go on and develop that to enhance their career and to demonstrate their competency within the companies that they choose to work for. They do get employment, and in fact we have a very high employment record, I'm delighted to say, and that's what I think in these economically difficult times is maintaining our attractiveness to students. We've been through difficult times, but things seem to be looking up now. So what do we teach? As with most food science and technology departments, I think it's a broad range of science subjects linked to the food area, from nutrition, chemistry, physical properties, processing, the whole spectrum. And I'm sure you know as much about that as I do, that these are the things which are the starting point for the knowledge which food professionals need. They will go on and develop it, but that's the starting point. Turning to the programme, the subject of the conference or this workshop, we're looking at the outcome or the contribution that this TrackFast report has actually provided. And I focused in on 3 points taken from, in fact, my starting point is where Rui left off, this question of the public interest in regulation. And the report highlights sort of 3 possible areas, and I'll come back to this slide at the end. The regulation of professions to guarantee quality and safety of food production along the whole food chain. And I'll just draw your attention to that. There is this point that SMEs might need technical support, but defined by a food professional. FST services are required by specific consumers. They don't employ their own, but they need a technical person, a professional. And then the final point, a large company may also be interested to hire an FST professional due to its recognised expertise that guarantees, I'll come back to that word, guarantees her work. So that's the starting point. But what's the reality? And I'm acting here a bit like a devil's advocate, as we say. It would be lovely if our graduates had a defined career, but what are the problems? What's holding it up? Well, the title I've got here is Economic and Social and Political, so I will have a look at each of those. The starting point from the economic perspective, I believe, is the question of this type of industry that we have, the food industry. And the vast majority of it is these SMEs. And for those of you who are not so familiar with an SME, it's a small, medium-sized enterprise. There is a piece of European legislation, believe it or not, defining what an SME is, and that's taken from it. So just look at that concept there. A small enterprise is one with less than 50 people as employees. Medium size, it actually goes up to 250, so it's quite a reasonable sized company, I would say, actually, a medium one. But then, of course, there are the large ones, which go well over that amount. So we've got lots of SMEs. How many? Well, I've got some data here from the CIAA, which I believe is rebranded as FDF or FDE just recently. There is some data. You can look at the data, and this says about the employment, the percentage of employment in SMEs. 63% of food industry people, food industry people work in SMEs. It's a big part of the industry. It varies across different countries, and in Spain, Belgium, it is much larger than, say, in the United Kingdom. In the UK, we have a greater number of large companies, so the employment and the contribution is lower of SMEs. But across Europe as a whole, and this data is for Europe as a whole, the thing I want just to focus on is that very last figure there. 99.1% of the food and drink companies are SMEs. But we tend to think, when talking about the food industry, of the big companies. The Nestle, the Danones, and all. I won't list them all, but anyway, there are the big companies, and we think of those. But of course, 99% of food companies are actually these SMEs. And there's some data here from Eurostat, and I won't take it all. But the one thing that struck me was under bakery and farinaceous products, the number of enterprises in thousands is 157. The number of employees is 1,531,000, which a very easy calculation says that the average size of a bakery and farinaceous products company is 10 people, which perhaps is not surprising, but that's the sort of industry that we're talking about. That's perhaps that's the smallest end, but it needs to be considered. And this fact that there are so many SMEs, and particularly small companies, was one of the problems that was faced when, in the UK, we were setting up a food standards agency, and the initial proposal was that there would be a levy on food companies at about £100 per company. Now, £100 is about 110, 120 euros. It's nothing. It's tiny, I would contend. But the industry said, no, we can't do that. That's a burden, that's an extra cost on small businesses, which, well, I wouldn't necessarily agree that it would put them out of business, but it's an extra burden which they campaigned against, and it didn't go ahead. Just for the sake of £100, 120 euros. Another thing on the economic side is, of course, we've been through a difficult 3-4 years, and it looks like it's going to continue. Europe has a 2020 strategy put forward by the Commission back in 2010 for a 10-year strategy for developing smart, sustainable and inclusive growth. And I was looking at some of the background to this, and I came up with this FDE, CIAA document, calling on the Polish presidency to create a more business-friendly environment. And there was this sentence in it: the CIAA calls on the presidency to boost manufacturers' capacity to innovate and become more competitive by creating a more business-friendly Europe. That's the economic reality that we're in at the moment. Does more regulation actually make that a more business-friendly Europe? So, turning then to the social issues, and I take this more in terms of what does society think of the food science and technology professional? Well, some people see us as the mad scientists, and we have to live with this. I can't see anyone who looks like one of these people in the audience, but that's what a mad scientist looks like. We have this image problem in the industry, within the profession. Sorry, not necessarily within the industry. Well, it is the industry as well, but it's the profession. We put nasty chemicals in the food. That's the image. We work in chemistry laboratories. We cause problems in people. Eczema, asthma, dyslexia, autism. We've been blamed for it all. We put these additives in, and that you find lists of things that consumers should avoid. These are the ones that cause you these medical problems, and you need to avoid them. The fact that they are regulated and they're only approved if they're considered safe, that's irrelevant. So this carries through the newspapers, and this reinforces what people see about us. Additives in food do harm children. This was the colours issue that led to the European Parliament demanding statements on food labels that certain colours cause hyperactivity in children. Cancer linked to sweetener, I think that's the aspartame one. Well, is it or is it not? Well, EFSA says no, but let's look at it a bit more. And so anyway, there are problems, but this is the newspaper, this is what the society thinks of us. And it's going to carry on because technology, science is advancing. We've been through food irradiation. We're still trying to cope with GM foods. Cloning is there, is in the background, coming along. We've got nanotechnology. The European Parliament and the Council of Ministers failed to agree the updating of the novel foods regulation because of this problem of the technology, the science, advancing science. It needs control, or is it over-controlled? And the reality is that this is what people think, and if you think I'm overstating it, well, back in 2004, this is what I saw on the back of a London bus, because this was a marketing campaign from a major food company, well, not a major, a sort of a well-known food company in the United Kingdom, and there's that picture of a scientist, a food scientist. We are mad scientists, according to society. We have to try and turn that round, and obviously we work hard to do that, but that's the reality. But where are these what are these food professionals doing? Even in these large companies, take Cadbury's, major chocolate manufacturer, employs numerous scientists, food technologists, food scientists, microbiologists, chemists, you name it, I'm sure they've got it. But did it stop them having a problem? No. They employed food professionals, and that's what happened. Salmonella. And the result, a couple of years later, they had £1 million fine for this. So they broke the law, but would the employment of a regulated food professional have stopped that? I would contend that they actually employ people who would fit perfectly the criteria for a regulated food professional. And the situation is more complicated because, of course, we're dealing with the food chain, and if one company employs a food professional, it doesn't necessarily stop a problem arising up the food chain or down the food chain. And I've got these headlines to do with dioxin. There was the Irish case of dioxin getting into pork, and that happened just before Christmas a few years ago. And a bit more recently, there was the egg problems in Germany. Again, animal feed, just like BSE, animal feed going through the chain and eventually getting into the food supply and causing problems. Would food professional regulation stop that? Would it help? I don't know. I suspect not. So, turning then to my final thing, which is the political reality, we are faced with a situation where the political reality is that people want to cut red tape. We're in this economic problem. We want to make it easier for food businesses, not harder. So wherever you go these days, it's the trying to make it easier, not harder, for businesses to innovate, to develop, to grow, to expand, to boost the economy. So we're trying to cut red tape, getting rid of the burdens on business. This is a website that the government in the UK has, Red Tape Challenge. And it goes through lots of different sectors, and you can see this is the one trying to ask the consumer, ask anybody, the public, to try and come up with things that can be reduced, cut the red tape in food and drink safety requirements. That's the reality that we're faced with. And I tried to sort of find a little bit of evidence to support this on a European level, but there was this document I found, which was a report prepared for the European Commission. So it's not a European Commission, it's not a policy statement from them, but it was looking at the dairy industry. And it was looking at the way in which the general food law had been developed, and pointing out that it didn't take into account the interests of food businesses. It looked at consumers, and of course we all know the reasons why that was there, and it put responsibilities on the industry to do things, but it didn't actually say, well, what's in the interest of the food industry to help it develop? And what it came up with was that it is revealed that administrative burdens are substantially caused by regulation in general, and specifically by systems deployed to satisfy safety and hygiene requirements. The reality is that we're trying to get rid of these rather than increase them. And the Commission is part of this. Press release back in the end of 2009, cutting red tape, overview of reduction measures and illustrative examples, and they have a section on food safety. These are things where they have actually simplified, reduced the burdens. This is the reality that we're faced with. So, trying to bring this all together, we in education produce professionals with knowledge. This is what the industry needs. SMEs at the tiny end, they don't employ us. They don't employ food professionals. As a company grows, it gets to the point where it recognises it needs to have somebody. And that one person probably covers practically all the things there. As the company gets bigger, then these things become specialised. The company buys in specialist nutritionists, specialist microbiologists, processing people. And then you get into the need for multidisciplinary teams. It's not a food professional, it's multidisciplinary teams of different professions. And I'm not quite sure how that fits into the concept of a food professional. The other point is, of course, that's just the knowledge, it's the skills. And it's the ability to do certain things. It's not always the person who gets the first-class degree who gets the best job. It might be the person who gets the third-class degree but has these skills, who is the person who is actually the best food professional. And that person, I've got lifelong learning up there, so it's using those skills for a long time and developing those skills, which was mentioned earlier, the lifelong learning. And the other thing I just wanted to mention as a contribution is that actually the thing that is increasingly important to the food industry is not food professionals, it's auditors. A lot of the graduates from our department, particularly the master's students, they're looking forward to a career as an auditor. And this is where a lot of the work is now, and this is looking not necessarily having the knowledge, but it's the skills to ask the questions. And it's where you've got multidisciplinary teams, it's somebody with the ability to look across that, to audit it, to check to see that the questions have been asked. And these people, and this is taken from the ISO standard, the competency needs. Yes, there's the education, there's the skills, there's the training, and there's the experience. So, just going back to this point I made earlier, that this was in the TrackFast report, I would contend that those 3 points are not proven. That, in fact, the regulation doesn't necessarily guarantee safety across the whole food chain. We have complex problems, and having a food professional won't overcome that problem. SMEs are unlikely to employ food professionals. The costs are likely to be excessive, and they will always find that difficult. And finally, the last point there, Cadbury's did not have any guarantee that their chocolate would not contain salmonella, simply because they employed a number of food professionals. So, yes, I would love my graduates to get wonderful jobs and have a career where they have a regulated profession. The reality is, I can't see it in the near future anyway, because of the economic situation, because of the realities that are out there.